If you give me saccharine footage of people being adorable and in love, I will pop all the popcorn. So much popcorn that the room is filled from floor to ceiling.
I want to tell Nick that I love him.
You're scared of heights, that's vertigo, that's vertigo, that's vertigo.
Nick?
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the
Everybody
procedure,
stay calm.
everyone?
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel, I like to talk about entertainment media. Following my review coverage 2 years ago of Heartstopper Season 2, I have returned to review Heartstopper Season 3. The review embargo has lifted, but there are a couple of do not reveals I will be swerving around, but apart from that, let's talk about everyone on this show. Before we proceed into the specifics of characters and storylines though, I do want to offer up just a couple of trigger warnings about some of the material in Season 3. Heartstopper is very sensitive and mindful about the more difficult subjects that it covers, but I do consider it beneficial to offer up that extra warning on the offhand chance anyone is watching this and might be in a vulnerable mental or emotional state about those specific things. Following the storylines of Heartstopper Season 2, we saw that Charlie has struggled with his mental health in ways that have manifested in problems with eating food, as well as self-harm. Those things are explored in more detail this season, so if you feel like you are not in the right place to watch someone struggling with those things on screen, you might want to proceed with caution. You don't see him self-harm, but they do show his scars. Charlie's ED is presented in such a way where he will struggle to eat, and there are other instances where he gets upset when some people are trying to help him and get him to eat his food. There's no binging or purging shown on screen because that's not the type of ED Charlie has. Another trigger warning I will offer would be some transphobia. The show presents this in such a way that clearly expresses those beliefs as bigoted and wrong, but it does come up in the story. We've seen before how the show has had different LGBT+ characters encounter other characters who express some bigotry or ignorance towards them about those parts of their identities. I would say that this is at a similar level of severity to things like Charlie having to deal with Ben, or Nick dealing with his older brother David, or even what we saw at the end of Season 2 with Darcy's mother. So those are the warnings. Proceed as you see fit, and everyone just make sure you're looking after yourselves and your mental health. To start things off, I would say that this season is great, and the only major critique I would give, if any, is that I really wish we still had Olivia Colman around to pop up in an episode or two. Now, I understand that she's Olivia Colman, she's very booked and busy, but I really would have liked to see more of that relationship between Nick and his mother because it's been such a highlight of his journey. Assuming that we get a 4th season, I really hope that the show can make things work so that Olivia Colman is able to be brought back for at least an episode or two. I can't help but wonder if it was Wicked Little Letters that caused the timing issue. Either way, I very much recommend you watch that film if you haven't already. It will probably end up being in my top 10 films of the year video that I will be doing at the end of the calendar year because it's in my top 10 right now and there is not that much time left this year for new films to bump it out of its placing within that list. First, I'm going to share some general feedback about Heartstopper Season 3 as a whole, and then I will go through more of the specifics character by character. If you are watching this review, I'm going to assume that you already watch Heartstopper, you already know these characters, and you already have some emotional investment in their stories and their relationships. If you are already a fan of the show, I don't think there's anything in this season that is vastly different from Seasons 1 and 2 that would throw you off, particularly in the visual presentation. The visual style of filmmaking, the bits of animation that accentuate various emotions, the soundtrack, stylistically, it's staying perfectly aligned with what we've seen thus far, and presumably what you already like about the series in that regard. Although the ensemble is quite large, I find it very impressive how efficient the show is with its shorter runtime. There's another show that I've reviewed a fair bit on this channel that also has a large ensemble and only 8 episodes per season, but unlike Heartstopper, that other show has struggled with efficiently distributing their airtime among the many characters of that ensemble and making everyone's storylines interesting and compelling to the degree that I would like for it to be. I think part of the reason why Heartstopper Season 3 is able to do this well is because the closeness of this friendship group is so clearly conveyed. Even when some people receive more focus than others, it's a very natural progression to shift to other characters and see how what might be going on with some characters is going to impact others in the group. If one character is struggling with something, it's natural that other characters in that group are going to be worried and do things as a result of that character's struggles. Let me check in on them. Let me have a conversation with them, and so on and so forth. Most of these episodes are closer to a half-hour runtime, and yet they still manage to pack so many things into the season's story. Even if certain storylines or relationships don't get as much screen time as the main ones, the show will still find ways to fill you in on the blanks of what you might not have seen on screen with those smaller subplots. Now, I did find that some of the storylines for certain characters didn't feel as eventful as others, but when you put those seasonal arcs into the larger journey of those characters whom we've followed from season 1, everything in season 3 felt like a natural continuation of what's already been established with those characters. At the time of recording this video, I don't know if there has been an official renewal for season 4, but season 3 did not feel like an ending, so hopefully those stories will continue. I'm going to start getting into specific characters now. Many of these characters are paired into couples, so I will go through some of the single ones first.
What can I do for you?
No. Nice to meet you. Yeah, he's really hot.
Oh my god.
First things first, the man of the hour, Jonathan Bailey. He has a small cameo role as Jack Maddox, a famous historian who happens to be Charlie's celebrity crush. And you know what I have to say about that, Charlie?
An excellent choice.
Jonathan Bailey really showed up in Heartstopper Season 3 simply to be hot and smart and make everyone swoon, and I love that for him. Next up, we have Tori. I love how in Season 2 she became a scene stealer by doing something iconic, which was threatening David. I love her for that, and I think everyone else does as well. This season, we see a lot more of Tori, and I was pleasantly surprised by how much depth and exploration was in her seasonal arc. She's quite refreshing in the ensemble because of how different her energy is from the younger characters in the main friendship group, but she's just as easy to get emotionally invested in, particularly when you see how deeply she loves her brother Charlie. One of the things you see earlier in this season is Tori coming into Charlie's room and just giving him a hug and telling him that she's worried about him and that she loves him. And it makes for a really compelling juxtaposition to go from seeing her as this tough, stoic, older sister character to now this season having these slivers of vulnerability exposed so we can see more of what's going on beneath her gruff exterior. Oh, and perhaps I should have mentioned this at the beginning of this video, but we do see just a bit of David again. I know he's the worst. It was a real jump scare for me when he popped up, and I would really appreciate it if you would leave your well wishes in the comments as I put forth considerable effort to heal my nerves. They've really been through it when I had to see David again. When last we saw Isaac, he was just getting introduced to the concept of asexuality, and we get to see him continue this self-exploration. But what I actually appreciated the most from Isaac's story this season was getting to see how good of a friend he is. When other people in the group are being a bit oblivious that something's not quite right with Charlie, Isaac is the one going, let me check on my friend and make sure he's okay. Despite Heartstopper Season 3 having an abundance of romance, and many of those romantic moments were highlights of the season for me, conversely, some of my other favorite moments were moments of friendship. Whether it was Isaac and Charlie's friendship, or even Nick and Tara's friendship, if there's one thing Heartstopper is going to do, it's deliver love in many shapes and forms. We also have Hayley Atwell making a couple of small appearances in Heartstopper Season 3. She plays Nick's aunt Diane, and she's mostly there to offer guidance and support that perhaps you would have had Olivia Colman deliver if she had been able to appear in this season. But nonetheless, Hayley Atwell is also a very good actress, so she's more than welcome to bring that loving, supportive energy to Nick's life. But now let's get into some of the pairs. One of my favorite subplots before Season 3 was Mr. Ajayi and Mr. Farouk having their little flirtatious fling in Paris. They were just cute as can be, and I'm so happy about the fact that Season 3 does check in on them from time to time. Considering how many couples there are on the show, Mr. Ajayi and Mr. Farouk's dynamic is refreshing among everyone else because they're adults who are more secure in knowing who they are. They've already got their careers as teachers, whereas the teenagers are still figuring things out about not only their LGBT+ identities, but also the more more universal coming of age things that kids their age will go through, of figuring out what the next step in their life is, going to university, taking a gap year, what will they study, where will they apply, what would they like to work towards, would they like to move somewhere different, things of that nature. Many of the teen characters in the ensemble are looking at those topics, so it's nice to check back in on Mr. Ajayi and Mr. Farouk and how their flirtation is coming along. In the season 2 finale, there were some hints of sparks of attraction for Imogen and Sahar, and season 3 will start to explore that a bit more. Is there something there between them? What are we really feeling within ourselves and possibly about one another? I can't say too much about their storyline ahead of the season premiere, but I will say that this was one of the smaller storylines of season 3, but the way that they wrote the material was very clever in how it managed to weave in updates about what was going on with those two, even when there was a considerable amount of focus on the bigger storylines of the season. One of Imogen's standout scenes that I really enjoyed this season was actually with Nick. It was an unexpected exchange, but really thoughtful in its execution and will undoubtedly spark a lot of conversation in the audience. Tara and Darcy's storylines sort of run parallel to one another in a thematic sense. In a way, it feels like they're both on journeys of self-exploration. Their storylines aren't really about their relationship as a couple because at this point they're already together, their relationship is solid, and nothing has really changed about that romantic relationship. They support and care about one another, so they know that this other person has their back while they are each working on figuring out things about themselves. It ties back to what I touched on earlier, where these younger teenage characters are at the period of life where you get a lot of coming of age material in their storylines. So for Tara and Darcy, they're both figuring things out about themselves. What do I want or not want in how I will choose to live my life moving forward? Sometimes it feels like the show is a relay race where the characters take turns from season to season, passing the baton of whomever is going to have the most stressful storyline. Like at the end of season 2, Darcy was the one who had the stress baton because Darcy's mother is the worst. Most of the time in season 3, Darcy and Tara get to have a break from being the ones with the stress baton, and that did feel like a nice switch up, especially because after everything we saw Darcy going through at the end of season 2, I don't know about you, but I would like to see Darcy just chilling and vibing. If we're going to pass the stress baton back in that direction, let's just wait to do that until, I don't know, season 4. Now we get to Tao and Elle, and let me just say that Tao is winning so many supportive boyfriend points this season. When I took a moment to stop and reflect on where Tao began his journey on this show, he was so emotionally volatile, and I don't mean that in a rude way. It made sense relative to his age, what we eventually learn about his backstory with how he lost his father, and that had a profound impact on him. This is one of the reasons why it's so important for Netflix to actually let its original series last beyond just 1 or 2 seasons. If Heartstopper had been yet another show prematurely canceled, we would have never been able to get to see Tao reach this point. Now, he's still a teenager, so he's not always going to do the right thing, but watching him go above and beyond to love and support Elle this season, it got me really emotional more than once. Elle, unfortunately, starts to become more aware of some of the uglier parts of UK society. Anyone that keeps up with the news will be well aware of what the social climate is like over there for the trans community on so many levels, culturally, legislatively. I was wondering whether the show would address any of that because of how severely things have escalated over the last I don't know how many years, and the show is set in the UK. Now, it doesn't go so far that they're trying to batter Elle as a character or the audience that is emotionally invested in her. Like everything else they've tackled on the show, it's approached with a lot of care and consideration. And a massive reason why Elle's season 3 story has so many rewatchable scenes is because of how her life is full of love. She has so many people in her life who love and support her. So even if she has these moments of feeling like she's closing herself off and feeling isolated in dealing with negative things, the show is so quick to remind the audience and to remind Elle that she is not alone. She has amazing people in her life who will support her with anything she needs to be supported on. I know that everyone loves Nick and Charlie, and don't get me wrong, they're great and continue to be great this season, but the Elle and Tao romance was working overtime to wow the audience, and I think all the romance girlies are going to get so much out of what those two are serving this season. Elle and Tao, 10 out of 10 romance material. Truly, I thank you. But now, of course, we have to talk about the main event, Nick and Charlie. Now, a lot of the intense drama from season 3 comes from the story doing a much deeper dive into Charlie's struggles with his ED, and more broadly speaking, his mental health issues. There are some details about his story that I cannot speak about right now because of the do not reveal list, but without going into specifics, I will say that episode 4 was a major highlight of the season. There's a really interesting switch up in the structure and format of this episode that allows for so many facets to be explored in Charlie's story, as well as how Nick has been dealing with his own emotions, with being very aware of what's going on with Charlie, wanting to help him, wanting him to be okay. Anyone that is close to someone struggling with an ED or mental health struggles will of course have their own emotional struggles as a result of that, but it's especially difficult when you are also a teenage boy still trying to figure things out with life, your own sense of self, and this being the first romantic relationship you've ever been in. One of the things I really appreciated about how the show discusses and handles everything to do with what Charlie's struggling with is that they go out of their way to contextualize to the audience that the way Charlie experiences this is impacted by a number of other factors, such as where he lives, the socioeconomic background of his family, the strong support system he has, as well as the mere subjectivity of his own experience. Even people who demographically overlap with Charlie, that struggle with the same things he does, have access to the same things as him, they might not navigate things the same way he does, or reach the end of his seasonal arc the way that Charlie does. It's very evident that Heartstopper is aware of how impressionable a lot of its core audience is, and that in addition to offering entertainment and a compelling story, it's also a platform that can be used to try to inform parts of its audience about any number of topics that come up in the story. And overall, I really enjoyed the way the show navigated this balance between offering fictional entertainment as well as being an educational tool. A lot of Nick's story does focus on his concern for Charlie's well-being, but the writing is so precise that it makes sure to clearly communicate more of the detailed nuances of who Nick is at this turning point in his adolescence. It also feels like a nice point of symmetry in Nick and Charlie's relationship, because in season 1, we had Nick trying to figure things out about himself, of learning that he's bi, of having to go on that journey of self-discovery and eventually reaching that point of being ready and willing to start coming out. And Charlie was extremely supportive and understanding of that, even when it was difficult for him because of what he had been subjected to by Ben, as well as just school bullies in general. And now Charlie's the one having to work through something, and Nick is reciprocating that support and understanding, and that's a way of showing this deepening and maturation of their relationship. I don't want to only talk about the relationship as if it's all heaviness and drama though, because that's not the case for this season. If you will recall, season 2 ended with a cliffhanger of sorts. Charlie had drafted an I love you message to Nick, but he had not sent that message. So the question was left open-ended. Is Charlie about to tell Nick I love you? Is he really going to drop that revelation through a message? Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that he is not going to send that message, and I'm very glad that he didn't do that, because I do not want to watch the first I love you and have it be through a text message or a DM. I want you to say those words out loud. We need to have a conversation in person for that. You two live in the same place. It's not as if it's a long distance relationship, and if it was, I would still tell you to say it directly to that person. At bare minimum, get on a video call. Now, I will not spoil the specifics of the first time saying I love you, but I will tell you it was so good. It was so rewatchable. It gave me a bit of every type of emotional high you could think of. It was giving suspense, comedy, euphoria. I got a bit teary-eyed. No notes. I loved it. It was very memorable. And while I have your attention on Nick and Charlie's relationship, I want to briefly touch on a mild spoiler. This is a nitpick, but I'm going to say it. There's a point where they go to the beach and Nick asks Charlie to put some sunscreen on his back, and when Nick offers to reciprocate, Charlie gets all, "Oh, I don't need sunscreen. I just tan." And that made me want to yell at my screen. Everyone needs to wear sunscreen. If I had a nickel for every time I had to pester a European into the importance of wearing SPF, if you don't have any Asian friends to pester you about SPF, let me fulfill that one and only task for you. You are supposed to wear SPF every single day. It doesn't matter if you're not going to the beach, and it doesn't matter if you live in a rainy, gray-skied location. So, there's my life advice for today. Wear SPF every day and stream Heartstopper Season 3 on October 3rd on Netflix, because it's a very good, heartwarming season with an abundance of romance and loving friendships.
I don't know what to do now. I really love him.